Okay, so your Chimo greetings. I just want to make sure people can get in. Hold on 1 second. Just gonna put this in the chat room for you, and then we'll be straight. Okay, so your Chimo greetings. I say once again, I'm Odwirafo Kwesi Radne Hempata Akan Odwirafo of Akwamu Mine, Amaruka Etifi Mudi Akwamu Nation in North America within Ojira Mine, the purified nation, Afurakani people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. So I want to touch on this topic. This is something that we've published on, but we're expanding the publications that we have. We're going to release a new publication on this subject, the AKRADINBOSOM. So let me pull up this. This is a chart on our website. And if you look at the chart, we have publications on each one of these 11 deities. The Akan Abosom in Akan culture, which is Ghana and Ivory Coast, the largest ethnic group in Ghana and Ivory Coast are the Akan people. There are about 26 million Akan people between Ghana and neighboring Ivory Coast in West Africa, one of the largest groups on the continent, and one of the largest groups from whom we were stolen and forced into North America. So many Akan people were forced into North America during enslavement, and we continued Akan ancestral religion under the Akan term Undu, which is Hoodoo. And we did a whole film on Hoodoo, Akan ancestral religion in North America. But what's important is that these 11 deities that govern the 7 days of the week in Akan culture, we have names associated with them like Kwesi and Kojo and Kwame and Afua and Ajua and so forth. But they go back to the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week and the spiritual forces that govern them. In our publication, as you can see in this chart right here, we show on top, these are sculptures from Akan culture representing these 11 deities, male and female divinities, the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that they govern, their expressions in ancient Kemet, Egypt, and Khanit, Nubia, and we prove that the exact same deities that were worshipped and invoked in ancient Kemet and Khanit, Egypt, and Nubia continue to be invoked by the same names in Akan culture in Ghana and Ivory Coast and continue to be invoked in the Hoodoo tradition in North America. So we show linguistically and cosmologically that these are the exact same deities with the exact same names that we've never stopped invoking, because of course these are the spirit forces that govern the 7-day week. And the 7-day week is governed by these solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that move in a certain cycle that affect all natural earth cycles and so forth. And we still invoke them. Now, we also show that these 11 deities, as you can see here, govern the 11 major body systems within Afurakani people, African Black people, specifically and exclusively us. We're the only people as original children of Earth that can invoke and be possessed by and guided by the spiritual forces of nature that govern the sun, moon, planets, oceans, rivers, atmosphere, and so forth. Now, so our book is groundbreaking because we show who these deities are. We show the origin of the 7-day week, going back to ancient Africa. We're about to get into that. And then we make the connection between the 7-day week in Ghana, the deities that are laid out in the language of the Akan people, and we show the language of the Akan people and the language in the Medut and Toro, the hieroglyphs of Kemet, and prove they're the same deities with the same names. And then when we were forced into North America, we continue to invoke them. And you have names like Kojo and Kwame and Afua and so forth, the same quote-unquote day names you find in Akan culture. When you look in old records of people enslaved in like South Carolina and the newspapers and so forth, and they have a group of individuals being sold, they say, well, these came from the Gold Coast and so forth, these slaves, and there's a young slave named Kojo and a young slave named Kwesi and a young slave named Kwame and a young slave named, Afua and Ajua. This is proof that the Akan day naming system survived into North America And when you understand what the day name system is, we're named after these deities. We're not named after the days. We're named after the deities that govern the days, and they govern the days because they govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies. Now, so let's switch over to the book, and then we're going to get into the details. Okay. Hold on 1 second. Okay, give me 1 second. It's just taking a minute to pull up. Hold on 1 second. All right. Okay, it's up now. All right, so this is our Nhoma page on our website. And you will see first and foremost, we have our book, True Historical Anthology. Let me grab that for you so you can see it. Okay. So this is that book we just released in spring of last year. So this is a 600-page book, 8.5 by 11, 12 of our books on true historical cosmology that we put together in one 600-page volume. So I'll show you how to order that. And in that, we have a number of different topics that we address, for example, including that Jesus and Muhammad and Allah, Yahweh, Buddha, Brahman, and so forth, the fictional characters of the Bible. We expose them, show how they were manufactured and represented to us or represented to us as actual living characters. They're all fictional and fraudulent, and we expose the fraud of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and so forth. A number of different topics in that book. But on our Nhoma page, that's the first book, but I've published 31 books to date. When you go to the Nhoma page on our website, Nhoma means book in Akan culture and language. You'll see the front covers of all 31 of the books. 12 of these 31 books are included in this volume 1, and they are expanded and revised. The Kuku Tum Tum book is the one that talks about the origin of the fictional characters of the Bible, Quran, Talmud, and so forth. We also have Afuraka Fraikai, the origin of the term Africa. That book is part of the volume, the 600-page volume. A number of these books are in that, but a couple of the books that aren't in this volume that we're going to include in a new volume this spring is what we're talking about today. So the AKRADINBOSOM book. Now, first, let me go to the AKRADINBOSOM page, and then we'll go back. So we have volumes 1 and 2 of this book series. It's a 6-part series, and we're taking the entire 6 parts. It's going to be a 600-page book as well, 8.5 by 11, all in one volume. You can look at parts 1 and 2, the older versions. We have expanded versions of them, plus the other volumes all together in one volume. And we're going to talk about that pre-order process at the end of this, but you can click on these now. But the page, we talk about the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week on this page. And of course, this is Amen and Amenet, the great father, great mother who comprise the supreme being. But we talk about the 7-day week, the chart with the day names, Sunday through Saturday, Abusida through Minminada, the male and female day names like Kwesi for Sunday, Akosua for Saturday or Esi, Kojo or Kwajo for Monday, Ajua for the female, Kwabena for Tuesday, Abena for the female, and so forth. So we have the chart there. We also have a chart showing 7 days of the week, the deities that govern the 7th day of the week in the Akan culture. And when you compare them, the exact same deities in the Yoruba tradition as Orisha, the Ewe tradition as Vodou, and the tradition of ancient Khanit and Kamit, Nubia and Egypt, and the exact same deity. So Awusi in Akan is the Akan deity, Abosom deity, Awusi, is the same deity who is called Obatala in Yoruba. He is called Dangbe in Vodun, and he's called Alsar, or Awusir, which is Awusi in ancient Kemet, same divinity. Ajowa in ancient Kemet is Oduwa in Yoruba. It's Minona in Vodun, and it's Aset in ancient Kemet. And we show the exact same deities, the same forces in nature, solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, and the spirits that animate them across cultures. Now, and then of course we have our chart there. And we also have a series of articles here on each one of these 11 deities. So first we put out volume 1, where we're talking about the culture and the structure in general. Then volume 2 talks about Awusi and Ajwa, Asar and Aset. And then volumes 3, 4, 5, and 6 go into the other divinities. We're going to put all of those together in one volume, and it's coming out very soon. Now let's go back, because we're going to start off with volume 1. When people look at the 7-day week, they often talk about, well, where does the 7-day week come from? Are we imitating, the whites and their offspring? Of course, we're not. We established the 7-day week before the whites and their offspring existed on Earth. And they learned about it from us. For example, when they talk about the Romans and so forth, they were imitating at first the Etruscans in the region of ancient Rome, which the Black Etruscans were in Southern Europe before white people existed. When the whites invaded, they learned about that culture. They were using the Etruscan 8-day market week. And then they switched over to the 7-day week when they invaded larger portions of the Southern Europe and the Near East and the northern part of Africa, North Africa. So let's go back to So first we talk about how these deities govern the soul, the divine consciousness, the spiritual head of the individual. So when we come into the world on a certain day, that day that's governed by a specific divinity that animates the solar, lunar, and planetary body that governs that day. The reason that an Akan person is sent into the world as an ancestor and ancestress returned through the womb of one of their descendants. So when a woman becomes pregnant, one of her great, 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 great grandmothers or grandfathers as an ancestress or ancestor is drawn into the womb for the first time in like 170 years and so forth. And this great elder or elderess develops within the womb for the next 40 weeks and then is born into the world for the first time in, a century or two. And this great ancestor or ancestress, we understand the nature of their spirit and so forth when we practice the culture. And when they're born on a certain day, it's an indication to the family that they were assigned to the specific divinity that governs that day pre-incarnation. So before they went into the womb, they were assigned to a specific force in nature, a male divinity or a female divinity, and that spirit made sure that the baby is born on their day. Even if there are complications or a cesarean section or whatever it is, they're going to make sure that that child comes out of the womb on their day to let the community know, oh, this is a child of this divinity. So we talk about that in the first portion. And it's similar but different in Yoruba tradition, Vodun, and so forth. Everybody has their own way of determining and finding out what spiritual force governs the spiritual head and what guides the person throughout the course of their lives. In ancient Kemet, we have the same concept. The term Ka, soul, divine consciousness, Kat, feminine, soul, divine consciousness, is the spiritual force that governs the head. The hieroglyph is the two arms like this, which is Ka or Ka'et. second. All right. And they even pinpoint in ancient Kemet where the Ka is located. It's on the spiritual head. So they're showing the symbol of the soul, the divine consciousness, the spiritual force that governs your head. The term Ka and Kat in ancient Kemet, in the Akan tradition, is called Kra and Krawa, same term. And then we talk about how the great divinity Ka and Kayat, the black substance of space that the whites in our spring now called dark energy and dark matter. Dark energy is the expansive force that we call Ka, a male divinity. Dark matter is the contractive force, feminine force that we call Ka'et, the female force. So Ka and Ka'et, that means soul, divine consciousness, but they're also the black substance of space. They're the consciousness of the supreme being that all the planets, sun, moon, stars, everything that exists within creation exists within that black substance. It makes up over 99+% of the universe and so forth. That is Ka and Ka'et, masculine and feminine force. They are the consciousness of Amen and Amenet, the great father, great mother, supreme being. So the great blackness, Ka, Ka'et, is also the term for soul, divine consciousness, Ka and Ka'et, for black people exclusively. So soul, Ka, soul, Ka'et or Kat, is also black. So when they say black people have soul, literally the word for the primordial blackness, substance, is the same word for soul. And that exists within our physical bodies, the black substance, the melanin within all of our organs, that our organs float inside, 12 centers of the brain, the cranial nerves, the neuromelanin, and so forth. When you're first developing as a child, all your organs are existing within that black substance, just like all the planet, sun, moon, and stars are floating within a black substance that governs them and transmits energy through its blackness between every planet, sun, moon, star, every celestial body and so forth. This black substance transmit the energy of different organs, glands, cells, and so forth across, the entire being. That black substance is Ka, its soul, in the physical manifestation. This is what we're talking about now. So that's dealing with the structural aspect of it. And we get into detail more about that because when we start talking about the deities, but first we want to talk true historically about where does the 7-day week come from? Just to dispel the notion that it comes from the whites in our spring. Now we talk about the Akan people, Akan, Khanit, Kanu, Kangi, Akan of ancient Nubia, Libya, and Sumer, and the 7-day week. This is one of the Tuareg in North Africa. The whites in our spring invaded North Africa later, but the original people are the Tuareg Berbers. They're descendant of the original blacks of North Africa. Osorkon II, you see him in the middle. He has tinted his skin with blue. These people, the Tuareg, are still called the people of the blue veil and so forth, and they put that blue henna on their skin. We see that today. That goes all the way back to thousands of years ago. He was doing the same thing. He was a Pera pharaoh at that time. Now, when you look at the 7-day week, they will talk about the quote unquote Jews accepted it, but it came from the ancient Kanana or Canaanite people and so forth before this fictional cartoon character group of Jews or Hebrews was manufactured. They never existed. We prove that in our book, the 600-page book that we have out now. And we talk about how they stole the story from the book of the Cow of Heaven, but they'll try to say it comes from the Canaanites first, and then the Jews picked it up, and then later in Christianity they picked it up, the Romans picked it up, and so forth. But they'll also go back to ancient Sumer. So let's check that out. Akan from the Akan dictionary. This is how we define what does it mean to be Akan. Akan people. Akani means an Akan individual. Akan fo means Akan people. Khan, the word Khan in the Akan language means the first, foremost, from the beginning, former, place, rank, or time. First, before. Khan also means to count, number, or reckon. To count, to calculate, to reckon. Khan. And Khan also means clear, bright, luminous, and so forth. So these are the three definitions of what being Akan means to an Akan person. First, foremost, from the beginning, from a former time, former rank previously, and so forth. The first people, part of the first group in existence in the world. Khan, to count, calculate, or reckon, using calculation, counting to establish civilization. You see patterns when the moon goes from one phase to the next, and when the sun rises and sun sets, the moon is in a crescent, the sun rises and sun sets, then it continues to expand. After 15 sunrises and sunsets, it's a half moon. By the time you get to 29 sunrises and sunsets, it's a full moon. And then it begins to contract, and they started seeing patterns. They were counting, calculating, or reckoning. And then they started dealing with agriculture based on the positions of the moon and when it's going to show up and so forth, the sunrise, sunset, the seasons. They recognized patterns in nature, replicated those so they could have agriculture. They could have, see when the herds begin to move, when they return, when the birds leave, when they come back, counting, calculating, reckoning. When certain plants would grow, when the medicine from those plants can be utilized properly, when the plants disappear and so forth, how many days is it going to take back for them to return? So we can have medicine, we can procure that. How long can we keep the medicine once it's procured from the plants in storage before it becomes spoiled and it can't be used and so forth? Counting, calculating, reckoning is the foundation for establishing a civilized society. So that's part of Khan. Khan, light, luminous, shining, and so forth. Now let's look at the language of ancient Kemet. Khan, first, foremost, from the beginning. That's from the Akan dictionary. In ancient Kemet, this is not Kent. It's actually the K sound, which is the dark circle. The wavy line here is the N sound, so that's K and N. And the loaf of bread right here, the little semicircle, is the T. So it's K, N, T. In the older dictionaries, they would stick an E in between consonants if they didn't know what the vowel placement was. And they would arbitrarily stick that E in between consonants until they could figure out what the proper vowel placement was, and then later on they would correct that. So that was just a placeholder to facilitate pronunciation. We know what the actual vowel placement is. It's not kont, it's not kint, it's not kaint, it's not kunt. But if it means in the front, the fore part, before, after, for time, formerly, previously, in advance, the beginning. If you look at an Akan dictionary, and this Akan dictionary was first being written in the 1840s. So they're sitting missionaries, Basel missionaries, Swiss missionaries, sitting in the forest with Akan people in the 1840s and saying, hey, what's the word for first in Akan? They say Khan. What's the word for dog? Kramai. What's the word for bird? Anuma. And they just start compiling the dictionary. So you're sitting in the forest in the 1840s, and these people are sitting, and sometimes some of these people are elders in the 1840s, meaning they were born in the 1700s. They learned their language from their great-grandparents who were born in the 1600s. This is where this dictionary is coming from. And when they say Khan means first, from the beginning, former time, previously, former rank, and then we look in a hieroglyphic dictionary to compare, that's thousands of years old, the language, and Kant with a nasal N, Kant means in the front, the fore part, before, after time, formerly, previously, same word, same meaning. Kantiu, plural, dwellers in the south, the Nubians. Khan, front land, the south. Front, foremost, from the beginning. Ancient Khanit or Nubia is the first land. Kemet is developed later. We migrated from the south to the north and established Kemet. But it was the ancient Khanit people, Khan people, first, foremost, from the beginning. That's the title of ancient Nubia, the first land, front land, foremost land, land of the beginning, from a former previous time. That's a title of the quote-unquote Nubians. Nubit is the original term. Nubit was corrupted into Nubia by the Romans and then Nubians, but it's the Nubitu is the proper term and so forth. So Khanutiu, the inland folk peoples or tribes from the interior. Khanti, the Nubian frontier, the land in the Sudan. So Khan, first foremost from the beginning, as a definition, is also a title of the people. The Khan people, the Khanitiu people, just like today, the Akan people first foremost from the beginning, but they also call themselves Akan people or Akani. This is what we have. Now, the Nubian people are the Akan people. You'll also see in Yoruba that Okan means first. So Kani, Kani, an Akan person, Kantiu, or Kanti, plural Kantiu, the Nubians, the first people, and so forth. What else did we say? Khan means to count, number, or reckon. This tethered rope symbol, as you can see in the Coptic dialect, it's actually the ka sound. So that's not thenu, but it's actually kanu. What does it mean to count, to reckon? Khan means count or reckon in the Akan language. Kanu means to count, to reckon in ancient Kemet. And we prove when you study the Medut and Torah, the hieroglyphs, and we have a class about how to read and write and learn the language of the hieroglyphs and so forth, the Medut and Torah, you see that the tethered rope can be the cha sound or the ka sound. Just like in English, the ch combination can be the ka sound, like in chronology or chrome, or the cha sound, like in change or check. Same thing with this tethered rope symbol. So that's kanu, same definition. And we show in the Coptic dialect of ancient Kemet, this symbol here is the ka sound to prove that. Hold on one second. Okay. So that's important because when you look at the title, tethered rope, once again, kanu, it's not thenu, but kanu is the tethered rope. You have the H, you have the little vessels for the NU and nu, that's plural. That is not tenu or chenu, but kanu. Again, they put the E in between consonants when they didn't know the vowel placement in this dictionary. But in the more recent hieroglyphic dictionaries by scholars, they don't use this convention of sticking an E in between consonants just as a placeholder. They don't do that. They'll just put the consonants like KNT or TNT or KHNT, and that's it. But in the older dictionaries, they would do that, which would throw certain people off. But actually, it's the ka, ha, n, u. So it's kanu. What does that say? The Libyans. So you have Kemet, and west of Kemet was ancient Kanu, the Khan land, but now it's called Libya. The original Libyans were the Kanu. So south of Kemet is Nubit, so-called Nubia or Khanti or Khant, ancient Nubia, what is now called Sudan. It was called Khant, as well as Nubit, especially the northern portion was called Nubit and later Nubia and so forth, but Nubit in the Medutu, the hieroglyphs. But Sudan itself is, Khant, south of Kemet. Archaeologists call those people the C group Nubians. Then west of Kemet, you also have the C group Nubians. They called themselves Kanu, later called Rebu and Lebu, and now Libyans. So you have Nubians who are south of Kemet, the Nubitu called Khan or Khanit. Then you have Nubians who are west of Kemet called Kanu. That's the proof there. And what does another definition of Khan mean? Clear, bright, light, luminous, and so forth. What is the definition of Khan, as the way it's spelled by the Nubians, Libyans, and so forth? To sparkle, scintillate, glitter, to shine. Any bright or sparkling substance, to sparkle, shining, light, luminous. So the same word, shining, bright, luminous, Khan, is also the word for the name of the people, Khan. In the Akan language, Khan, clear, bright, shining, luminous, is a definition, but it's also the name for the people. The first people to receive the light of civilization through spirit possession, that's illumination and so forth. The spirit possesses, gets inside the body, illuminates the people, shows them how to pick plants for herbs and so forth, shows them different things, Once the spirit leaves the body, the person has been illuminated by that spiritual force that came down and possessed. That illumination is Khan, the light of civilization, and so forth. Same definition, same word. So the same three definitions that we use to define what it means to be an Akan person today is exactly what they said in ancient Khanit and Kamit, Nubia and Egypt. So Khan, it's a count, number, reckon, tell in the Akan language. Language of ancient Kemet, Kanu, to count, to reckon. Okani, person of Akan descent. Kanu, the Libyans, people west of Kemet, the Nubians and so forth. Khanitiu, dwellers in the south, the Nubians. And then you also have Tenu and Kanu, Libya and so forth. So as we can see, the Khan people, and that's just, when we go to ancient Kemet, the same Khan people went to ancient Kemet, established ancient Kemet, and since ancient Kemet was a black land and so forth, and they're black people, we also called it Kemet, but also Ta, Meri, and different titles of the landmass, and the people and so forth is descriptive. But the Kanu, the Nubians who migrated to Kemet, they started calling themselves Kametiu and Kamau and so forth because of their placement and the energy of that region. But they're still ancient, just like if someone migrated from the south, from Mississippi to Chicago, they can say I'm a Mississippian, and they went to Chicago and called themselves a Chicagoan and so forth, but they're the same people. Now, we said, notice that the ancient Black Tuareg of North Africa are remnants of these ancient Khan people. They still are there. The Tuareg still maintain the ancient 7-day week. That's critical because it comes from the ancient Nubians. In ancient Kemet, there was a 10-day week because of the movement of certain stars and so forth, and they were on a floodplain. So they did their calendar based on the floodplain. They lived in a different kind of region where you have a strip of fertile land right along the river, and then desert on each side going for miles. So it hardly ever rained in Kemet, so they had an agricultural calendars based on the 3 sets of 10 days, 30 days, 3 sets of 10 days, and the movements of certain stars every 10 days. That was unique to that strip of land that governed Kemet. But the people outside of Kemet, the Nubians in the west, the Kanu, the Nubians in the south, the Khanitiu and so forth, we had a different structure. We lived in a different area, a different way and so forth. So the calendar was different, and they had the 7-day calendar based on these deities. Now, Tuareg culture, they still exist. Those Tuareg people we showed you still exist in the same area. And then we talk about in the origin of the Niger-Congo speakers. Dr. Clyde Winters demonstrates the Niger-Congo speakers. Talking about the languages of the people of Khanit, Nubia, Kemet, and then going up into Sumer, so-called Babylon. Before it was Babylon, it was Sumer and so forth. Before the whites and their offspring invaded that area, it is now called Iraq. But before Iraq, it was black people who migrated from northern Africa, North Africa, into the Near East, where Israel is now. It's called Kanana, so-called Canaan, but Kanani people. The same Khan people called ancient Kanana, Canaan. Then they migrated to where Sumer is now, continuing to go north. It was called Sumer at some point. Before that, it was called Kangi. So you have Khan, Libya. The Libyans or the Kanu migrate north. They cross into the areas where Israel is now. They called it by their own name, Kanana, and they called it the Kanani people. And the land called Kanana, later called Canaan, and later on the whites and offspring stole that and started calling themselves Hebrews and so forth. Then we continued to migrate north, establish Kangi, ancient Sumer. Now, okay. And to pull that together, and the reason we're showing that because they're the origin of the 7-day week, he talks about ancient Saharan Africa. So before, there was a Saharan desert, it was a great green area before the desert dried up and so forth. So when they talk about the original homeland of the Niger-Congo speakers was probably situated in the Saharan highlands during the Unanian period, talking about migrated to the Fezzan, Nile Valley, Sudan, after the desert began to dry up. or the green land, the green Sahara, as they call it, began to dry up. People migrated from that area, and they ended up in ancient Kemet and Sudan and so forth. But at first, where the Sahara Desert is, from west to north or east, Afrika, that was a great green, lush place. So he talks about the home of the Egyptians, Sumerians, Niger, Kordofanian, Mandi, and Dravidians. When we migrated into ancient India and so forth, we were in this fertile area. The Sahara Desert began to develop. All the greenery goes away and so forth, and we have to migrate to the regions where there are great rivers. Some migrated south to the great Niger River, the Ger-Ngaran, so-called Niger River. Some migrated east to the great river of Hapi, so-called the Nile and so forth, and that's what happened. We talk about the DNA proving that, our people were Black and so forth. Now, and we also show that the same DNA profile that you see that clusters in West Afrika right here is the exact same E1B1A haplogroup that you find that Ramasu III had, passed it on, and 80 to 85% of Black people in North America have the same haplogroup because we're directly descended. So we can show genetically we're the same people, descended directly, linguistically, and through culture and cosmology. Now, here's the piece we want to get to. Kangi, this is the ancient title of ancient Sumer. It's the Kang, and NG is nasal, Kang, or Kangi land, the land of the Kangi people. The Kan people, the ancient Kan from North Afrika, the Kanu, the quote-unquote Libyans, the ancient Western Nubians and Southern Nubians. They migrated into the north, continued in the northeast into Sumer, and established Kangi. So we show even in ancient Kemet the origins of the term Kangi and so forth, and we get into detail about that. So going through that, when you read the text, you'll see we go into detail proving what the terms Ka mean and why we had that same name that we preserved it. Now, continuity of culture from ancient Khanit, Kamit, and Kangi, and Sumer, and Akan. When you see the ancient fertility sculpture, Ubaidian period, pre-dynastic Sumer, 7,000 years ago. Then the mother goddess of fertility, Inanna, dynastic Akkadian period. Then you have the same figure in Akan culture, and she's also holding her breast like she does in the traditional form and so forth. Same fertility figures, same name and so forth, from ancient Kangi all the way to the Akan people in Akan culture. Same fertility, Ankh, anthropomorphized with arms and legs, hands and feet and so forth, same structure. In ancient Sumer, they'll say, well, the 7-day week came from ancient Sumer, the ancient Babylonian Empire, but that Babylonian Empire, before it was Babylon, it was Sumer. And before it was Sumer, it was Kangi. They had the 7-day week, Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn. And then in their language, Utu, Nana, Sin or Swin, Nergal, Bilgi, Gibil, Enki, Gu, Nabu, Sagmegar, Sulpai, Inanna, Nin, Urata, Kaja, Manu, and so forth. Those are the names of the deities in ancient Kangi or Sumer for the 7-day week. So we have Akane, Kani, Kangi, and so forth. That is Kang with the nasal end, Kangi, Kangi. In the Akan language, that's Kangi, Sumer. So why do the Akan people, you see Akan people in Ghana and Ivory Coast, they have a 7-day week. But then the Guan people north of them have a 6-day week. The Igbo people in Nigeria have a 4-day week. The Yoruba people have a 5-day week. So you have these different groups surrounding the Akan people that have 4, 5, 6, even there's a 2 market week. So when they combine the 2 4-day weeks in Igbo, it becomes an 8-day market cycle and so forth. But the Akan people uniquely have a 7-day week, and everybody around them doesn't have that. But when you look back to the ancient Akkad Empire, if you look at the Empire of Akkad, as you can see here, Akkad, it's actually spelled A-Ga-De, Akkade, Akkade. That's one of the pronunciations in the Akan dictionary, as you can see here. For Akan, you'll see the Akan dictionary, we also call it Akane, Akane, which is Akkade, the ancient Akkad or Akkadian Empire. And then we go through each deity in the Sumerian language or Akkad language, Utu, the sun, and show how it's taken directly from a descriptive title of the same deity in the language of ancient Kemet. So when we see Utu and Ud, which is Uru, Uru, you find that is a title in ancient Kemet of great Ur, Uru, Ura, and so forth, plural, Uru, and then Ra, Ur, Ra, Uru, Ra, the great one, and so forth, operating through the sun. This is why they call the sun Utu or Uru or Ud in ancient Kangi. It's a title of Ra when he's operating through the sun. The moon is called Nana, but later called Sen and Swin. So they'll say Sin, Sumerian Nana, and so forth, Swin, and all of that. Oh, and by the way, we also show that Ur in ancient Kemet, Ur, Ura, Ur becomes in Akan, Ura, 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 which is a sacred title and so forth. And that's associated with the divinity operating through the sun in Akan culture. So when you look at the term for sun in Akan, the term for sun itself is spelled O-W-I-A. And some people say, oh, that's Owia. The way it's pronounced is Oria, Oria. If you're an Akan person, they won't say Owia, they'll say Oria. And if they're Fanti, they say Eria. They put the in the front in Fanti, in the Fanti dialect. In the Akwamu dialect, it's the O. So instead of Eria, it's Oria. So it's Oria, Uria, Ur, Ria, and so forth. Same thing. Same deity of the sun. Now we do the same thing with each one of the deities. Sen and Nana and so forth as a title of the moon and so forth. If you look in the Akan language, Nana is a title used for the moon. Elder is but a title used for the moon. We show that. But then in Akan culture also, Eshang, the moon, so-called from its silvery light or luster. Shang means moon. That Shang, meaning moon, and the spirit that animates the moon comes from Sang in Sumer, meaning the moon. So we go through the same thing with Gibil, Gis, Bar, and so forth, Gibri. And we go through the same thing, showing the title of Biri and Gubiri. Gubiri comes from Guben or Gubini in Akan, talking about the deity Bena, who's also called Gu, the metal caster and so forth, the god of war, metal, iron, planet Mars, and so forth. We go into detail showing that's the same thing. I want to move through some of them a little quickly. You can read the details. When you have the planet Mercury, and they talk about Gu, which means voice, Enki, Gu, Nabu, and so forth. In Akan culture, that's Aku, the messenger, the spokesperson, the messenger of the supreme being. That's Aku. It's said in ancient Kemet. It's Aku or Awuku. In Akan, it's Gu. In Sumer, Aku or Kweku Anansi, the messenger, Wednesday born, planet Mercury, all of that. Well, the planet Mercury is called Gu in Sumer, which means the voice, the messenger, and so forth. Well, Aku in Akan is the Essane, which means the messenger, and he's the planet Mercury, spirit animating planet Mercury. Here's that Nubti title. We talked about Nubia, Nubti, and so forth, but the Nabu in Sumer is Nubti, Nub, and Kamit, a title of Set, who was Kwekwanazi. Sul Pi becomes Soro Pa in Akan. And we talk about Sramain and Sramain Pi and so forth, the Soro Pi. The Soro Pi is Soro Pi and Sramain Pi in Akan. We're talking about the same deity operating through the planet Jupiter and so forth, the spirit that animates Jupiter. So we go showing that Sol Pi is Soro Pi. There's no L in the Akan language. There's a rolling R, just like in ancient Kemet. There's no L. There's a rolling R. So Sul Pi, talking about Jupiter, is Soro Pi. It's also the planet Yao in Akan. Yao Pater in Latin is Father Pater Yao, which is Jupiter, Jupiter, or Yao Pater. Well, the deity of Thursday is Yao, the planet Jupiter. He's called Yao in Akan. People born on Thursday, if they're male, it's called Yao. That's also a title in ancient Kemet of the deity Heru. He's called Yao, and he operates through the planet Jupiter, which is called Sebares, or the southern star. It's also called Yao, and he's called Heru Yao. In Akan culture, it's Yao, but also Sul, Soropai, ancient Sumer, the Sul Pi, same thing. So Inanna being Venus, great mother divinity. That is Ina, talking about a mother divinity in Akan and so forth. And they talk about Venus, Ishtar, sister of the sun and all of that. So Nin, Anna, Lady of Heaven, fertility, divinity, and all of that. One of the titles of Afi or Afia in Akan, the spirit that animates, Friday, the planet Venus, or Afi, called Het Heru or Cheche in Kemet. She's called Het Heru or Het Her. In Akan, she's called Cheche. She's also called Fi or Afia. She's called Fi in ancient Kemet as well. But she's also Enna, the mother, fertility mother. That's Inanna in Sumer. And we show that in detail. And then the planet Saturn is called Amini in Akan. It's called Seba, Amint in ancient Kemet, the star Seba of the west, Amint. And then in ancient Sumer, Uru, Idim, Sagus, and so forth, Akkadian, Kaj Amanu, regular, stable, usual, steady, that's the definition. So it's Kaj Amanu. Men in ancient Kemet means to remain, abide, continue to be permanent, fixed, stable. Mint, the feminine, firm, stable. This is why they said Amanu means normal, regular, usual, steady. That Amanu is that man or men, meaning stable, permanent, fixed, and so forth. Many, daily, mint, menta, regularly, consecutively. So in Akan, when someone is born on Saturday, they call the planet is called Amini, the stable one, permanent one, and so forth. And you call Kwa Amini or Kwamini or Kwame and so forth if you're male, or Amini, Ama if you're female, and so forth. We're talking about the same thing. So Kaj Amanu, which is Ka Amanu or Ka Amini and so forth in ancient Kemet. Same thing in Akan. So we look at that. So we have the praise names, the names of the days of the week, and so forth. And the same thing with the, hold on 1 second. So when you look through all the 7 days of the week, Ka Jamanu, which is Ka Amanu, Ka Aman, or Ka Amin, Amini. You go through Venus. So when you go through all 7, what we show in the book, and as you read through the book, you'll see all of the details. Each one of the 7 days of the week in the Sumerian dialect. And this is the question you have to, that people had to ask themselves, and we answered it. How is it that the Akan people in West Africa in the forest, when they asked them, what are the 7 days of the week? You all have a 7-day week? Yep. We have deities that govern each one of the 7 days. Yes, we do. They list the names of the deities. You can find them in the Akan language dictionary. We have them here. Why are the same names in Akan the exact same names of the descriptive titles of these deities in ancient Sumer? When they dig up ancient Sumer and see these 7 deities on the wall and look at their names, and they say Utu and Nana Ashang or Gibil or Gibiri or Gu or Suropai or Inanna or Kaj Amanu, and you have the exact same names in Akan culture for the exact same deities in the same order. And then when you look at the language of ancient Kemet, you see these same names as descriptive titles of these same deities governing the sun, moon, and the 5 planets, because we originated it. Now, let me go into one more piece and then we'll be done. We talk about the ancient North Afrikani people, and recently there's been some genetic testing, and of course the whites and offspring always try to lie, but they, it's hard for them to continue to lie because, they test, mummies from ancient Kemet and so forth, and they find that they're Afrikani people. And they've done genetic testing that's been proven over and over again. The Arabs are still lying online, talking about the Egyptians were white and so forth, and they're the descendants and all this other nonsense. One of the more recent studies genetically talks about how, the Egyptians had North African DNA. They started using the term North African. They didn't want to say sub-Saharan African because it proves to be black, but they can't say they came from the Near East. So they started saying the term North African, which is meaningless. But they started saying it because it sounds like, well, maybe they were mixed and maybe they're white because the people in North Africa now, North Africa, are invaders, just like the Arabs invaded Kemet. And they've been there for the past 1,400 years. In the northern part of the continent, the so-called Berbers, the whites invaded. The original black Berbers are displaced. They still live there. We just saw images of them. But the whites aren't there, like Gaddafi and people who look like him. And they say, well, those are the North Africans. So the Egyptians were North Africans, and therefore that's them. Okay, so let's look at ancient North Africa. If you want to talk about North Africans. So in Tassili, Niger, in the Sahara, the ancient rock art that goes back thousands of years, this is what these ancient North Africans look like. So 8,000 years ago, 9,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, this is what the pictures of themselves that they were drawing. This is how they looked. They're drawing themselves. These aren't white people. They're drawing the flora and fauna in the areas. This is in the Sahara Desert before it became a desert. And when you look at the headdresses and the motifs and the armbands and everything, you can still see the people in ancient Kemet and Sudan today, the indigenous people, they still wear these exact same headbands, necklaces, armbands, and so forth. So this is ancient North Africa. These are the ancient Khan people. And the Tuareg Berbers are descendants from these people, and the Tuareg still have the 7-day week. And some of the Tuareg people, when we migrated west from Kemet, were in North Africa. Some of those people living there for the past 2,000 plus years, they were invaded in the ancient empires of Ghana, for example. Over 1,000 years ago, they were invaded by the Almoravids. the Muslims. And when they were invaded, what we ended up doing was some of us moved from the ancient empire of Ghana 1,000 years ago and moved south. We were up near the desert and so forth. We moved south. We didn't want to get involved in Islam and that foolishness. The neighborhood was going down, basically. So we moved south and reset up the empire in the forest belt where we weren't used to living. And that was the Akan people who established civilization, reestablished in the forest belt. And that became the Akan Empire of today, Ghana and Ivory Coast today. That was 1,000 years ago. And then a few hundred years after that, we're living in the forest belt, reestablished the Khanit Empire or Ghana Empire and so forth, Akana Empire. Some people invaded certain areas, snatched some of our people, and forced them into the Western Hemisphere. And Akan people ended up in the Western Hemisphere in North America as Akan people, practicing the Akan tradition as Undu, which is now pronounced Hoodoo and so forth. And this is how we ended up in North America. But we continued the same day naming practices, and our film goes into that. Okay. So that's the ancient, when you hear the term North Africans, since these individuals are liars, and they try to make it seem that North African means white, a euphemism for white. Look at ancient North Africa. These are the original people. This is where the original 7-day week came from, preserved still in Akan culture today. We're named after these deities and so forth. So that volume 1 of the book goes into the true story. And then the rest deals with each one of these 11 deities, their names, their functions, aspects of creation they govern, and so forth. Now, what we're doing with that text, and if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat room. What we're doing with that text, and you'll see this here on our page. And let me post this up for you so you can see it. If you look in the chat room. All right, let me put it back in the chat room. That's the page right there. We just put this up yesterday. So it's brand new. You see the different books and so forth that we have and classes and all of that, reading and writing the Medut and Toro, the hieroglyphs, meditation and so forth. But we just put this up yesterday. So we already have volume 1 and volume 2, volumes 3, 4, 5, and 6, plus volumes 1 and 2 are going to be combined in a full 600-page volume, and that's coming out this spring. So if you want to do a pre-order, you can pre-order and just put $13 down today, and you'll get the book at a discount. It's going to be a 600-page book, very similar to this 600-page book. So this 600-page book, 8.5 by 11 full color, encyclopedia size. The AKRADINBOSOM book is going to be 600 pages as well. It has to be, it's a lot of information and so forth. The information you already see on our website is going to be included, revised, and expanded. We have articles on these 11 deities. All 11 deities, we have articles on them on our site. And we have volume 1 of the book where we do Awusi and Adjoa. It's a 60-page book. But that 60-page book is going to be expanded to a 600-page book, and those articles have been expanded into full books and so forth. And instead of sending out 6 volumes of the AKRADINBOSOM set, we're like, instead of doing that, we're going to put them all together in one book instead of 6 books. So we're putting them all together in one book, 600-page book that's coming out this spring, but you can get it at a discount now. And when you order, you put the $13 down now and you pay the other 3 $13 payments over the next 2 months. By the time you pay that off, the book will be out. And plus, that will help us with the production of the book. So that's one of the reasons we're doing it now. When you go to the Square site, you'll see you can break up it's $44 plus shipping, $52, but you pick Afterpay at checkout. And when you pick Afterpay, you'll see that right here. You break up your 4 payments of $13 each. So you pay $13 today, you place the order. Then every few weeks, you pay the other three $13 payments, so you stretch it out. But that's going to help us with the production of this 600-page book. But we just released that yesterday. We've been working on this book for a minute. We put the articles out a number of years ago, but since we've been going back and forth to Kamit and getting more information, we started including more information in it. So it's going to be a large volume. We're the first to prove that the Akan 7-day week and the deities who govern the 7 days in Akan, and also the 7 major body systems. As you can see here, the 7 major body systems are governed by these deities. Well, 11 major body systems, sorry, governed by these deities of the 7 days of the week. We're the first to prove linguistically and cosmologically the Akan 7-day week and the deities governing them are the exact same deities from ancient Khanit and Kamit and Sumer. And they were preserved culturally and linguistically in the Hoodoo tradition in North America. When you see we have day names associated with them, we still invoke these same forces in nature by the same exact names. So, okay. So Yeda said we just had somebody who just while we were on the podcast, place an order for the pre-order for the book. So just go to the link. You can get the pre-order. Yeda said to those who have, supported the work. But when this book comes out, we're tying Hoodoo in North America to Akan culture in Ghana and Ivory Coast, to ancient Khanit and Kamit, to ancient Kangi or Sumer. And then when we show the relationships of these 11 male and female deities, show who they are in the Yoruba tradition, show who they are in the Ewe Vodun tradition, show who they are in the Igbo tradition and so forth. All of our people in North America, if you're Akan, if you're Igbo, if you're Yoruba, if you're whatever you find out your clan is, when you study the attributes of these deities, these forces in nature that govern your 11 major body systems, reproductive and circulatory and immune system, lymphatic and so forth, when you see how the immune and lymphatic system work together, then when you look at the deities that govern the immune and lymphatic system and see their marriage and what the stories cosmologically are told about how they interact, it's the same interaction between the immune and lymphatic. You'll see that we were talking about biology, we're talking about geology, we're talking about astronomy, we're talking about, agriculture, as well as spiritual cultivation and spirit possession and spirit communication and so forth. So we're studying a number of different things on multiple levels, but different Afro-Akani ethnic groups will be enriched by their study of this work. Just like when we study the Yoruba tradition about the Orisha, the Vodun tradition, it's interesting to study their expression of these same deities. So when I look in the Akan tradition, they say, oh, well, the Yoruba express their information about Obatala this way. Well, we're talking about the same deity, Awusi, in our way, and we're enriched by the way they talk about him, and they're enriched by the way we talk about him. If they're talking about Ajua, who is Aset, and they call her Odua in Yoruba, Minona and Vodun, when we study Vodun and how they talk about Minona, the goddess, mother divinity, and Odua in Yoruba, we're enriched about how we deal with Ajua. When they look at how do the Akan people approach this deity, we call her Odua in Yoruba. What do the Akan people have to say about her? And when they read our information, they're like, wow, that gives us more insight into the way we practice our tradition. So there's cultural exchange. So it's, any Black person, when they study this work, they'll be studying the forces in nature, astronomy, geology, biology, as well as spiritual cultivation. Okay. You said question. So the great Ka and Kayat are actually the god and goddess of melanin. Yes, the black substance of space that contains all the planets, sun, moon, and stars, that is the quote unquote cosmic melanin. And a portion of that goes into the formation of all the planetary bodies, the black substance in the planets. Stars are called black bodies that give off black body radiation. Our sun is a black body that gives off black body radiation and so forth. And when the primordial earth was formed and the black substance that made up the planets and so forth that went into our bodies, and that's the melanin within us physically, that black substance up out there, a portion of it is in our bodies as melanin. Just like the air outside, in the atmosphere, a little tiny portion of that you pull into your lungs that animates you. The solar energy from the sun, 93 million miles away, you take a little portion of that and pull it into your body and so forth. Well, and a little drop of water of the ocean that's taken up in your body. Hold on one second. Okay. Okay, so I had to take a call. So we're gonna end it now. I'm just going to the page. Let me see in the chat room. Okay, let me see. Yes, so that's right. Okay, may I say. So I just want to make sure it wasn't a question that I missed in there. But yes, go to the page. This is going to support our work. But we're working on this book and we're going to get it out maybe by the end of this month, possibly if we can, or in April. But we're going to try to see if we can get it out by the end of March if we can do that. So, Yerase, we thank you for your support. Please go to the link now, check it out. Only $13 down, and you'll be, your order will be placed. You're on the list. And Yerase, we thank you. And Yabesha Bio, we will meet again. That's it.